this direction or facing me. Already too much, huh? Okay. Very much. We're going to be working together in groups, so don't worry if you don't like the position you're sitting in. You're going to be facing the table you're sitting at soon. So I just want to start with a little bit about process. My goal is to spend as little amount of time up here as possible and to spend all of the time supporting everyone to have voice and everyone to have the opportunity to give input and give some thoughtful consideration to the very difficult tasks we are staring down at right now. So to kind of help us with our frame of mind, we first kind of disheveled you, and I apologize for that. That's my responsibility, and I'll take credit for that. But to bring you back we actually have Pastor Riggs has a little exercise he'd like to share with you, and I'm going to have Pastor Riggs do that now.
The four things.
Yeah. So it's not really an exercise; it's just a learning.
I call it next.
Yeah. No, it's okay. I just didn't want the build-up to be like we're getting ready to do something great, and then I just talk. You know?
Sorry, can you use a microphone?
Yes, I can. Yes, absolutely. So, so when I left Hamden to go to Valley Forge, I served as the director of congregational transformation, which is, I thought, and I always have to say this, I thought that was the worst title you could give someone, because director of congregational transformation sounds like you're going to help them, you're going to get them to change, right? Which is what this conversation is all about. But only the Holy Spirit, only God can change a head, a mind, and only God can change a heart. And so the key to what I'm about to tell you has to do with that. That has to be in place. So there are four churches, four kinds of churches, three that I realized that I came in contact with. In terms of big, broad strokes of churches, what do churches look like that are in a situation like the one that you are looking at? They are ready churches. So I ran a program called Rekindle, and then ran a couple of local programs, and these programs brought the pastor and several lay leaders together to do strategy, learn about strategy that they would take back to their congregation and try and lead change in their congregation towards a greater sense of health. So with that, I found these three churches. The first churches is the Ready Church. Those were churches that whatever we did in Rekindle or other programs, they're escaping my name right now, their names right now, but that they would take the information that we gave them at the beginning of the workshop, and then they would go home and they would implement it. Now, what we did was they would come back during interim times and have these conversations via telephone, which would now be Zoom, and Rekindle had a whole video conferencing thing. But they were ready churches. So what they would do is they would go back, and they had no problem implementing it. When they got back to the mid-session conversation, they would want to know, they would be reporting out. This is what we're doing. This is how this is working. It's going really, really well. Then there were churches, and I found that the majority of our churches in ABC at that time in the early 2000s were in this place, ready to be ready. So the church, the pastor and the leadership would come, they'd get the information, and then they wouldn't quite know what to do with it once they got back home. And so in the mid-session conversation, they would say, well, we're having struggles or we're having issues thinking about or thinking through. We're thinking, we don't know how to. These are the kinds of conversations that they would have. And then there were churches who would drop out of the program. And those were, I coined those unwilling, unready. And those churches were churches that what they found out was, they said they want, all three of these churches said, we want to change. We want to do what we need to do. We want young families. We want young kids. We want our Sunday schools, our churches, sanctuary. We want Sunday to be vibrant. We want to do ministry in the community. These unwilling, unready churches, they said that too. But when they found out what it was going to cost them, when they realized that this is going to cost me, this is going to cost us, it's going to cost us time, it's going to cost us not getting my way, it's going to cost us, and all those churches, from the ready to be ready, unwilling, unready, that they all came across the same thing. It caused conflict within the congregations. The ready churches were able to handle conflict and maximize conflict. The ready to be ready churches it didn't tear them apart. Conflict didn't tear them apart. But the unwilling, unready churches, when they found out how much it was going to cost them, and there might have been some people who were ready to still go on, but the majority or whatever, the conflict that happened, they didn't know how to handle the conflict. And the conflict, would as you can imagine, it was like, an explosion. Then when I went to Nebraska, I found this other kind of church. Unable church. An unable church has been unwilling, unready for so long that they no longer have the energy, the desire, or the vision, the wherewithal to do anything. All they could do is, last one out, turn off the lights. Unwilling church. They didn't want to think about anything new. They simply wanted to. Now, why is that important? I think as churches kind of deal with this, I think all churches, even the unwilling church, I think all churches have the potential. That's my sermon. If you just kind of think about my sermon, all churches have the potential to do something more. So let's start with the unwilling churches. The unwilling church will do something more in becoming a low scale, this would be a big leap, but a low scale, ready to be ready, right? To move from not unwilling, unable, to move from an unable to be unwilling, unready, or even to a low scale, ready to be ready, but ready to be ready church. That's a big jump, and that's huge. But I think all churches have the ability to move. Unwilling, unready churches, with the right surrender, with the right mixture of encouragement, I think they can move to that ready to be ready. But the ultimate goal is really to be a ready church. And a ready church, the way I would describe that is they have their sails set. That when the wind blows, they lock their sails and they go where it takes them. Because they're ready to do the next thing, whatever that next thing is. So for a ready church, the biblical idea is the wind blows where it wills. And we can't see where it's coming from or where it's going. And that's the Spirit of God. So those are the 4 churches.
Thank you.
Yep.
Absolutely. All right, now we get to see if Brian's technology works. So that's always fun. Although I get to report to you that I was at a meeting where one of the upper management of Apple was there, and the upper management of Apple guy could not get his presentation to go. Which I thought was kind of hilarious. And I felt a little bad because I know I'm not supposed to find that to be hilarious. It was kind of hilarious.
Oh, well.
So, especially since, on a daily basis I have a conversation with an Apple device that doesn't usually go well or shouldn't be said in church. So, that's where we are. So this is one of many conversations. So I think one of the things we do sometimes when we have conversations is we think it's the last time we're going to talk about something. And this is not the last time we're going to talk about something. This is the beginning of a new era of talking about what to do next. So it's one of many conversations. And I think that gives us the ability to take a deep breath and to just pause, as Pastor David encourages us to do. So introductions. So I did that a little bit before, but I run a school system. So one of the things I'm tasked with on a regular basis is to get conversations going about things that are tricky, they're complicated, and they require everybody to be involved. Because at the end, it's not my plan, it's not their plan, it's not, Susie's plan, it's everybody's plan. So it's really important that we, so I thought, when I offered to do this, that experience might be helpful. You can let me know later if you disagree. So the format is intended.
Can you straighten that?
David, I thought you said you'd help me on this. Come on, huh? You work for Apple?
Tippy. It's just a little tippy.
And the computer's probably laughing at me saying, ha, 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 it's not me this time, it's you. So format. We're doing everything in a format that encourages you to have voice, every individual. We're pushing to be inclusive, so if that means there's somebody who should be here next week, then please bring them in. Let's talk, is our attitude towards that. We're also looking at consensus build, because we left off the aim. So there are things that I like to refer to as grease for productive conversations. There's other terms for it. But some of that grease is to monitor our own airtime. If you find yourself talking a lot, monitor that and just let other people talk. Some people use the rule that if you talk, you wait for 3 other people to share a thought before you talk again. I'm going to leave that to you as individuals, but that encourages productive conversation. Other things that encourage us to be productive is if we have something to say, start with and. And is a very soft way to continue a conversation, and it encourages the momentum of a conversation, as opposed to or other ways to start. I think is a great way to start a conversation because you own what you're sharing. My opinion is a great way to start a conversation because sometimes there's a tendency to state things as facts and really their opinions, and it encourages us to talk. I feel is also helpful because our goal is to listen and to share. So in terms of productivity, there's going to be what we call a parking lot. And that's going to be one of these pieces of paper stuck to this wall. And the reason we have a parking lot is there's times when that's a really important piece to bring up, and we do need to talk about it. But right this second, it's not the time. Doesn't make it any less valuable. It's still incredibly valuable. It's just that right now is not the time, which is why it's not the only meeting. We're going to have more meetings and more conversations. So that's what we do. So if you think you want to put one of those, that'd be great. When something occurs to you that you think is important, when a great idea you think might start derailing a conversation that was happening, take a sticky note, which we'll be handing out in a couple seconds, and feel free to place it on the parking lot. It's just, and we will come back to that conversation, and that's really important that you do that, because we don't want to lose your conversation. I would encourage you to initial it if you think that the conversation if somebody needs to ask you what exactly you meant by that. Mine are always like that, so I encourage that. So we always start these things with prayer. What I'd like you to do is we're going to go through this prayer together silently. But before we start it at the bottom, we start off with a lot of we's. At the bottom, I want you to, in your mind, add an I. And next week, we'll start off with the I's and make those we's. So take a moment and think about a prayer that's on your mind, and that's for you. And later, we'll ask you to write that down so we can make those into we's for next week. So let's pray together. Dear Lord, please hear our prayer.
We feel a little bit like those who asked to walk through the desert. We are a church with great faith, great love, and joy. We pray for your guidance. We pray that you help listen to your guidance. We pray that we might see with new eyes. We pray for courage to move forward. We pray for compassion. We pray for the spring season of this church. We pray for Central Baptist Spring, for rebirth, for transformation. We know that you are here as we are gathered in your name. We come with serving hearts, and we thank you for entrusting us with this challenge.
Amen. So we want to start with a little piece about how we're feeling. So Pastor sent out an email, and the email talked about feeling a little scared, a little sad, a lot of those feelings that we're all kind of working on, and I suspect one of them right now is impatient because we started a little slow. So, I think that that's a place where if we look at consensus, I think right now we're probably in a place of consensus on some of these areas, and maybe more. And so that's all of us. So while we're in consensus on that, that doesn't mean that we don't bring different shades, we don't bring different lenses, that we don't bring different ideas to the table. Those are ours. Those are all belong to us to share. So let's move on. So what I'd like you to do, so we're going to take, and we're going to talk, everybody's going to take and have a sticky note in front of them, and they're going to, for one sticky note per idea that they have that we need to do, something we need to take an action on, we're going to write down that action on that note, and we're going to provide you more and more notes as we go through, and to take 2 minutes. Why are we doing this? We're doing this because in a silent moment of thinking really intensely, it is extremely, you use every creative juice you have. It also encourages those who are not the first to speak to get their idea down, and we're going to have a process of sharing those ideas. We have plenty of sticky notes coming, so don't hesitate, and we will start bringing them around. If you do need a pen, there are pens here. I'm glad to have my kids help you bring them around for us if you need a pen. There you go. So we need the sticky notes put up.
Here's one sticky.
Need a pen?
Okay,
You gotta pass out one sticky note to each person, please.
It's only one.
So there's sticky notes on your table?
No,
just have one?
No, that's okay, I'm gonna skip it.
No,
We need another one.
we all have one.
Pen?
You all have one?
I have one, I already used it.
Is that the next one? Here's one.
Well, they're coming with
There you go. My kids are trained to be conservative with their resources, so, they,
We want the whole pack.
I would apologize for that, but, how can I do?
Now you're talking.
I just hope that they're not,
We got a whole pack. Now we have two.
okay, so we're gonna start our 2 minutes. I'm gonna set the timer now.
All right, what do you want us to do again?
So for 2 minutes, thank you for asking, Nancy.
No, just want to be clear.
Oh, no,
Oh,
you're just
change
gonna
it.
write, no, sorry.
Back.
So you're writing down one action that we need to consider to merge. Your directions, sorry about walking into it, is right here. 2 minutes. We're all thinking about merging. So those are 2 minutes. You can keep going if you can multitask a little bit. But take a minute if you have, just to prioritize what you would like to talk about first. What's your number one? What's your number two? What's your number three?
You wanna collect the last sticky notes?
Nope.
Do you want us to just call them out, Brian?
No, just prioritize yours right now.
Okay. Sure.
All right, so if you have them prioritized, what I'd like you to do is in your table groups to go around and have a conversation about merging. As you share what you believe needs to be done, then please have them, place them on the large sticky in the middle of your table. Please. So you're sharing one, and everybody shares their top priority first. The reason we prioritize more was because we wanted the opportunity for you, just in case somebody steals your idea, you know how it goes, to be able to have another one ready to go.
You want to shoot? Are you ready to see it?
Brian, do you want me to turn some lights back on so people can do this? Would it help to have
I didn't
lights?
turn the lights off.
I'm just asking, would you like me to do that?
Those are the extras.
Are you afraid to share? Here, I will share. I'll say one thing. Oh, we're supposed to share.
Yeah,
Let's pick a model.
share your first. Share it with your group. Your top priority, go around and each person shares, and as you share, place them on the large sticky, please.
I wrote down what to be okay to bring. I go, I was hungry with our resources, such
No, the stickies on the Yeah. I think that was filmed here, where I read.
When you finish, put the sticky right on the big pad. That's your part.
That's where you are in your life, right?
how to approach other churches and congregations.
Mine is a little bit different.
That was why we put all the ones complaining, and then I get the other one.
Oh, that's wrong.
Right.
Whether it's to what we're doing.
Yeah.
As far as usually the scientific fact statement is
Physiological. Psychological.
there's gonna be a reaction.
Theological?
Give us an example. Theological differences?
Yeah.
Or choices that
You
we
wanna know that. Or the plastic and the certificate of he may or may not.
Yeah?
maybe the result might be.
No, theological.
Clarifying question. Make sure that
partners, and I didn't know if the word belief was the exact word I wanted. Whether, and how they go along with the church that we may want to merge with, will we be a good match? I use beliefs and I didn't know where I put the term I really wanted.
Yeah, but I got stuff I have.
Give them another post-it so you can.
The second question.
Only one idea on a.
So give them an extra post-it.
Yeah, that was my idea.
I think we need to just, if we're gonna merge, we need to remain, we need to decide on these.
Race talking, race talking.
Okay.
If we think about if we're gonna merge, we need to just give consideration to, are we gonna move?
All right, I know I'm new and back many years being absent, I have a great idea that I'd like to share. And I'd like to say transform Central Baptist Church
If
into
you've
a
run out,
community
sitting
Christian
smiling.
center.
If you've run out, feel free to do anything, so, to clarify.
Rather than merging.
To clarify
This way
so
they can
everybody
all
else,
share their
whoever
own
reads that
philosophy,
note later,
their own ideas, different worship times, different spaces within the church. But we're still creating a group where we're all together, so it's more people to build a better use of the building. To maintain and to pay homage to so you provide a space for Haitian church, Spanish church, the MCC gay church, all the different churches that are in the area that are looking for a space that are sunken overhead. They don't have a space. They're drowning. And I'm going to share this as part of an idea. I talked to the Salvation Army. They're drowning in their space tower. And they really need the space. They need the space heaters. They were currently paying $950 a month for them, and they want to move. And the building that they're in is up for sale. It's named the church. It's been for sale for 5 years. You know, so they're looking for a space. We have space. They would provide something about food portion, and they have their own religious worship services on a daily basis. So by not merging with them, but working with other religious organizations versus the merge. It's just my idea.
Yeah, well, this is a.
So,
Put that on the post,
if you would,
everybody can talk about it. But I think it's just, we're providing a space for other religious groups to come into.
We do have some
And
that's
I
a
know-
good idea.
I know we have some already,
Yes.
but promote that more, get more in. We have space, this can be used the same time we're using the big one. You know, there's a lot of space in that building. And it's a great piece of real estate, and it's very simple.
so when you're done merging across the top, is it large letters?
May I ask a question? How did you get to this point of merge?
That's just. Right now, we're just talking about.
He wasn't here when Cameron was here and spoke to us. So that's that we were.
So, when you guys are finished up, you want to write merging across the top. Straight.
Somebody with nice handwriting, not me.
You can't have everything, where would you put it?
They meet every morning at 10 and 10:30, and they're down on Franklin Street.
When do they have a Sunday? I couldn't.
They have a service 7 days a week. Yeah, and they don't have a large congregation. It's 10 p.m. for an hour. They run a food pantry 2 days a week, on Wednesdays and Thursdays. So that would bring the food pantry back into the building, which we've been in before. And it's part of part of the community. They're having trouble getting back into their building because since the fire, they have to rebuild, even though they got an insurance money to repair, the city wants them to put in another. Well, you know the North, the Salvation Army building downtown, they're not using it, they can't use it, the city won't let them use it. So
they're renting from the abandoned church up here on Franklin Street, which is, I think it's a Methodist church, I'm not sure which one it is, it's right on Franklin Street. It was a very small church.
So we're gonna wrap this up in about a minute, okay?
Their church.
Is there a place for that?
Two, we're gonna get some too.
Okay.
Music program, what will it be like? Trying to formulate. How much lost it?
Some direction, we have a script or something.
Others using our facility.
We have to have discussion questions.
Right.
I mean, obviously, maybe I'm getting ahead of myself now, but we have to draw a list of possibilities in terms of church. Do we stay with Baptist? Do we go with Congregational?
Confederated, is that what you were talking
Yeah.
about? The other day, confederated?
Yeah. And I have that list already. Well, that's awesome.
Wait, you're the chairman of this.
All right, so we're gonna move into our next, could I get somebody to volunteer to take your large merge file and to stick them to the doors over here for a moment?
Make sure it says merge at the top, please.
I know you-
Take the second.
Yep, please, yes, please. This is just the beginning, just starting, just warming up.
Your two ideas.
Yeah.
No, I want to see what I wrote.
So it's okay to just put the rest of them down, that's great. This is just the beginning, you're not done talking about it, this is just out of the block. Just keep going, and you can keep adding them too. So
I got number 3.
you just, there's more stickies in, we got you.
Here.
It's just the beginning. So I know this is gonna take a stretch of imagination, but can you imagine what our next task is?
We want to know.
So the next task is do the exact same thing. We're gonna start with our 2 minutes, and we're gonna have our silent brainstorming of ourselves, for ourselves, and thinking of every idea we have about going towards selling this property and changing where we have church. And I'll start my 2 minutes. Just raise your hand if you need a sticky, and we'll bring them to you. Okay, so I'm gonna back it up, but I realize that. Right. This is about selling.
All right.
We're now about selling.
Even though it says merge.
Yes.
Appraisal.
Find a realtor that deals in this?
So this is about selling.
This is about selling.
All right.
You know, I would say, get that stuff from the cities, that you go right, because they're doing merge right now. So I'd say get stuff from the
take them. No. She's taking them.
She gets the one.
This is the one file.
About 30 more seconds, but as you know, you can still write. This is just a nice time where you can concentrate.
Here's your three files. Those are all twos.
All right, so we're gonna go ahead and do the next piece. Let's see if I put margin on the next. Okay,
Oh, you like that color? Okay.
so we're gonna go through the same process, but now we're talking about things we need to talk about before we need to prioritize for a minute. Take a minute to pick out your number one. What things we need to think about doing?
Okay,
Before selling, right, before selling.
For selling.
put them all up.
And then when you're ready, you go ahead and start sharing your number one thing that needs to be done before you move down this path. And
Just put that, right on it, and we'll put it down. Thank you.
He's coming around with those.
so, and I would just encourage, if you had a airtime, if you have an airtime issue, try to keep as a group the conversation moving along. Try to get number one through. And we'll try to even up the groups in the future so we're not having timing issues.
That's fine.
Finding a realtor, whether a church realtor or not, and using Alan Shields as a resource because he is a realtor. And then assessing appraising, which we have pretty good those pages by YouTube.
I put, find a place. Right?
two different selling or merging. They're kind of the same, as if you sell, we either have to merge or build our own, a different place. So you gotta figure that out. So my first one was appraisal, evaluation of how long that process would take as far as the sale, because we may not have to move, it may take 5 years to sell the church. So you wanna stay here until you sell it. And then you have, in that process, when you have a positive possibility, you have to move quickly to find a new place. So you kind of have a conversation ahead of time with another church saying, we're gonna sell our church, can we merge with you later? You know, so you've got, it all works together. Because it overlaps, because it could take, I only noticed that I looked into 2 other churches for sale downtown, there's more than that. But they're taking years to sell. So in the meantime, we need to keep this building open and operating and ready for sale all the time. You know, it's a logistics. So you've got to fill that void running out of money between this point and selling the building before the city takes it for not payment. Yeah, you know what I mean? So it's like.
I say that the realtor needs to know what our upgrades were, all our amenities, all the things that we have done to this building to make it marketable. Because we've done a lot.
And I don't think,
our church is desirable.
and I do, just as an opinion, I think that it should not be a local realtor. It should be a large out-of-state from New York City or Boston, because a lot of those companies are coming in, look at Helicon Mill, they're coming in, they're investing in property, and they're moving into Norwich because it's cheap property. So they have bigger money to come in and repurpose this building than somebody here in Norwich.
And I don't think you need to go to the realtor house, because all the realtors use local listings. You can do a local realtor,
Yeah, it just, you need a large commercial realtor, I think.
When you're looking at a lot of the buildings that have been sold, and now maybe that's why
Yes.
But you gotta come in with the money.
They're coming in with the money, like the building down here, which was the old gun factory, which was then the Norwich Textiles, that's owned by a New York firm, and it's up for sale, and it's been up for sale for more than 10 years. So that's a huge piece of property, it could be turned into apartments and condos, but somebody bought Helicon instead and did it there. So you've gotta have the right people who know the right people to sell it, because otherwise the process is gonna take a very long time.
whatever we do, it's gonna take time.
That's one of my questions as far as we sell the church. The audience that left the church, certain things, and we still for this, what happens to those funds? They have to be returned to family members, or does the church get? Do we have, who's our, are you the financial advisor to the church? Are you the financial? Okay, so those are a lot of questions for her, to find out each of them, I just was looking through here, there's a lot of different funds left for different things. You need to find out what to do with them. Can they be put into the general budget, can they be transferred to something else other than what they've been left for? Yeah, because that's an important piece of this whole puzzle, honestly, it is. You could walk away with $0.
I think we need to be more cautious of sale of building, that we're not talking about personal property. This is not including property.
Oregon is not. Yeah, I know that they took out the old Oregon from this year. Organs are expensive. But didn't they sell off the old one?
We have a $12,000.
There's a company in Rhode Island that restores and rebuilds my organs. Maybe they'll buy them if you wanted to sell it. I can remember that.
On the point, we realized that in having
same time.
And, right across the street, Chelsea Players are playing. And in Wesley, Rhode Island, there have been two big churches that have turned themselves over to art and plays.
There's a stage right upstairs.
And we, I think we're ideal for that, we're very simple. This is in the right. And now we have restaurants going in. I think we should
Kind of a room going into the bay.
Renting.
Is that what it is?
Things are getting changed out, right? 'Cause it sounds like lots of ideas.
Okay, in no words, I'm
Lots of
saying,
ideas in the city.
in no words, on the horizon, we shall feed ourselves. This creates energy. And, they can go in for us, front or unused church. And in pickup just recently, there was
We're
a
getting everything
church
written down,
seated
right?
next to
And then the conversations, we'll make sure we can have them
there are
recorded.
places we want. And that might create more energy for people that really
Now
need
you
to
just
be
can't talk to me and see about
join the church.
church.
And there we are, brand new, we're 37 of us coming in,
Right now, she works on
after
Sunday.
175 years.
The only thing is,
we're not the same
I'm
37.
trying to work.
No, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
We have to get up and go that they did.
No, but
Fire,
No rush, man.
fire.
Because I mean, the upstairs of this building is perfect use for theater.
That
It
is
really
why,
is.
you may not know, the stage is much smaller than it used to be. Because they had construction things up there. This is the stage.
I haven't been up
But
there.
it's more shallow.
I've been going for
Even if they're right here, that's why we have two
It
years.
takes time, it's just the first half hour.
That's why we have to do this. Because they didn't have to leave this
That's why we get it written down.
I mean, there's a lot.
But if you leave it before it's sold,
I don't come in the
the prices go down. It will. Real estate people want to buy a building that's in good condition. You drain all the pipes, leave it sit here empty for 3 years or 4 years, it'll deteriorate very quickly.
And
It's got a lot done to it to make that. I know that. I'm just coming back. I know that. So if you shut everything, every system down, and you empty this church, and you leave it sit here, and it takes 5 years to sell, it's gonna go down every single year. Ice is gonna work its way through the shingles, work into the building. It'll be digging years, and that took 20, 30 years to do that. So that's what we're having here, we're not in
why we
here
have to work on
So you're
maintaining.
gonna come in and you're
That
gonna
I,
go right.
I throw it on the table. It needs to be maintained. I mean, if you shut down part of it, like, there's nothing going on in the noise building, shut that portion down, but have it so that it's still viable for the rest of the church.
I'll stand, somebody hold my chair.
We got you.
But I saw the heating units on that side of the building.
What we have.
Right behind.
in our survey, it noted that if we have small churches come in here and there, they're not gonna provide us enough money to keep going.
We're just gonna bring it up and finish
Because
the.
we are using money month by month. And you see that it's going down, down, down. But yes, another bigger church came in and wanted to bridge the church. Here we have a great big church, bigger than ourselves.
Have you ever
The other people that own that church now.
You got it.
She petered out.
We have one on the
lost
street
their
over here if
energy.
you need it.
All of a sudden, it's not theirs anymore. They lost that energy and they just petered out. So, do we have enough energy right now in this 5 years?
We can pull up there next to Rosemary.
Seed ourselves somewhere. That's, those are the critical.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like the possibility of someone, if there's with like an option to buy, a church of the mercy that shares our belief system that we can work together with the possibility that they might.
Oh, wow, okay.
And then it's not really the best of both. I don't know. It seems She's on her way. And I agree.
You gotta keep the two of you separated, is that it? If you're not ready, we have to take her around.
We don't play nice
I didn't put that up because I didn't think it was
I mean, that can be great anyway, because I thought this other Sean.
I think it's very relevant. That's right.
Decisions,
And so is this.
In a good place?
Yeah.
Everything on the,
I'm the ready church.
Is there any chance we could shift that table back so the circle opens up just a little bit? Would that be possible?
these kids, you know?
What do you want? Sit on the table? Let's skip this item.
Everybody's sheets down there.
I didn't put anything on there.
So, we're gonna leave that there. We're gonna,
Tables is more room.
You want someone inside?
we're trying to open the circle, because we're gonna put more people in.
Okay, we need to push this back then.
No, you're good, you're good,
Oh.
you're good.
Well, wait a minute.
So,
We just separated. Yeah.
You're taking my knees with you.
So we're gonna move you into the really easy part. And that is, one of the reasons we talked about facilitating the conversation a little differently than our standard meetings is that there's such an issue that we need to, a lot of this, the work we need to do really is a lot of tasks ahead of us. So the very easy next part is to figure out what 3 tasks that we need to move forward on in the next week. So at this point, I need whoever the council people are that have groups, I need those council people to be in the group that has what they chose to, or what they got assigned to work with. So I don't know who you are and where you are. So if you raise your hand if you're a part of the selling group, can you do that? So do we have looks like we have a group.
You want us to move?
And so and raise your hand if you're part of the merger group?
And this is just council?
Yes,
No, I'm sorry.
merger group,
Merger
please.
group, okay.
So that's
Yes,
Paul.
that's you, I'm sorry.
Okay, so that means if I just move Rosemary, this becomes the merger group. I'm very sorry, Rosemary. So, I know, I keep asking you. Okay, so this is a merger group and this is the selling group. And if some healthy young people can help me put all the merger stickers here and the sales stickers here. Does that make sense?
By Paul. No.
All right, so
This is the merging group. You have to move.
So if you're not merging, you go over there.
I think that's something we need to talk about. Is that what that
I don't
says?
know what this is. Leave this on my
I think that,
I don't know where it goes.
let's parking lot though, so we make sure we get to them before next week. Merging or selling, you have to choose a side. And you're gonna be asked to look at both again, so if you wanna pick one today and move to the other the next time, unless you're on council, that's up to you. Council people, sorry, but we're kind of pushing you to. So you're gonna share, you're gonna look at these, look for, and you're gonna work to find a consensus to choose the 3 that need to go first. So you might do, the first thing is, that you might actually read them individually, and then kind of shift the papers around, so you get a good feel for what's first, what the whole group, the whole all 30. That's how I would. So I would start by taking the papers, reading through them as like groups of 2 or 3, and then passing them along so you're familiar with all of them. You're going to see themes. You're going to see repeats.
ideas that
That's
came
the
out of
nature
this
of
group.
this. So and as you read them, you're kind of coming up with what you think the first 3 things we're going to do this week are.
Brian, can you use the microphone? We have no idea what you're saying.
So we're trying to think of the first 3 things we're going to do this week. So that's kind of, as you read through them and you process all of the information from all of us, you're going to come to a conversation about the top 3 things that you need to consider for the group you're working with.
You did, you made the list already, so let's.
So let's read everything and then make the list.
Yeah, give us, we already saw most of this.
Get your phone.
Are there any other American Baptist churches here in Norwich?
Certification, maybe 3 or 4 on a sheet.
So Mark, did you come up with one? Sorry.
Since then, the Asian church is down to the church. Is the Asian church currently synagogue?
No, they're
This is the one that's over here.
So try to make sure you're always reading some more of them, so you're moving through.
There's also first congregation.
Somebody wants to pass the word over you. Yeah, let me have that.
Pretty much the same.
There's actually some way to.
Oh, all right. Yeah,
You guys can get involved.
so I'm just trying to get, these are the ones here.
Go down.
This was a vision.
You know where the building is in the bottom, page 2?
Yes.
Right next to
Sometimes churches are about location. One thing I like having a church.
Lee, have you seen these?
Some of these churches.
Don't worry, I'll go down. Can I have this one?
Oh, okay, okay. This one is interesting.
That's not a good thing.
Here, let's give me some more of these.
So we would move to these churches.
For example, progressive theology,
Please. Your son-in-law talking about it.
Yeah, to approach a church that doesn't.
That's where all the work is done.
Yeah, but I mean, we need to modify the rate. So I was gonna take it off. So list of all possible
I don't think so. No, this one.
Is there anyone jumping out at you? So far, we've talked about list of all possible churches we would merge and have a discussion about what we're looking for. Like as preliminary steps that we can work on.
They don't do that.
So I know the group is big, but as you start to have a discussion, bring everybody in, please.
So are we gonna do that this week? Exactly, so what else can we add to those two that we can focus on this week? Okay, and there was a note that said that. How do we approach other churches and congregations?
So if we start
Is
talking,
that a good list?
Mark and I were talking, we saw on here also, that it seems pretty important that we need to investigate the realtor before we read, and that probably is the first step. And Mark also mentioned maybe a broker like Bill had,
All of them are important.
might not sell our property, but might know of someone who might want to buy, because he was the one that did the work with Camille with us. So he might be not necessarily a realtor, but he might be a good one to have a conversation.
Did you get Bill's name down to the city?
How do we approach other churches? I would think that he would be a
Great option, so, go around, what else came to the top?
From the bank, they got an appraisal from the bank as to what the buildings were, getting an honest appraisal. The realtors will tell you what you can get, and the appraisal will tell other people how much people will get loaned for the building.
And they just do it.
Appraisal, because there's some, we don't have to tell the realtor what
So
the
you're talking about getting
I
a
think
appraisal.
different if it was our session first.
Well, you wanted to be there.
Right, well, we need to go over,
We're bringing to the table maybe thinking different.
And just so you know, you folks over here, these folks have a hard time hearing you. They're a bit out of the, they're sitting here quietly, because they're out of the.
Yeah, so if we were trying to talk about what we're looking for.
Not because they're.
So just for the end, say the three priorities of each.
Exactly. It's just the first step. It's the focus for the week. I'm not sure
Somebody had to
what
go
the next
and
step
get a
is.
mortgage.
Maybe it will be eliminated.
So we're trying to three for this week, trying to get down to three this week. Okay, the next step is, who's gonna do
Well,
it?
the
And who's gonna call the person who's supposed to do it for Wednesday? How are you gonna communicate with each other during the week to know that
how
you did it?
much a bank may loan someone else. We don't have to tell anybody else about it.
I realize it is ASAP.
But they also need to know the upgrades, what we have authorized down, all the upgrades. One might be more desirable than another.
Our last appraisal was done, we didn't have things like upgraded HVAC system, we did not have a ramp on the front of the building, we didn't have a ramp on the back.
We didn't have Wi-Fi.
We didn't have Wi-Fi, so a lot of things are upgrades that we put in this complex.
Well, where is he?
Last time we were out, we went to the
Because we may want to add to that list.
So remember, this is week one, so that's why we set multiple
Well, we're
meetings.
being
You
open-minded
can't do everything in a
right now. We're
week.
just making a list. Right. But in terms of the process, we can list anybody we want to. I think that when we reflect on it in light of, because we need to expand this discussion, I think, as to what it is we're looking for, because I think it's a long list.
Cameron and David
But
are going to set up that.
we're turning over every rock, I'm so glad.
So you might.
In fact, you've got a lot of experience.
How much longer can we sustain this right now? 2 years?
So probably just set some sort
That's our
of.
time, we gotta get rid of this building in 2 years.
But in 2 out of those 5 options, 2 became to the church. 9 went to the church.
The building is, cafe over here.
That's the missing David.
No, that's not. They give a raise over here.
As long as you remain active church, like keep the money.
How are we doing? Do we have number one and number two? Is there a consensus around number one and two? Appraisal number one. Or at least find a group of people meeting next week. Try to step that back a little bit, 1 week. What's number
I
three?
don't know if council picked based on their.
Why wouldn't the
interest
merger
based on-
with
work done
First Baptist North?
David and Cameron in
That's
letting the
probably
town
one of the
know.
reasons.
They're gonna meet with the mayor.
It's important.
Meet the mayor.
It's only fair, I think, for the town to know.
Okay, well, you wanna put another one on this group? So the next part of this is, who's gonna do it? And what, how are you gonna check in midweek to make sure it gets done? Who's gonna find the realtor? Me? Paul?
Someone mentioned her. I don't know. They might have. They might have. Sounds like yes, Emily, I have lots, can we borrow you for a minute?
Yeah, right now I don't think we should look across any turnover every.
Well, no, Emily, they also have people that will contact the real estate resources.
We have real estate and nonprofit partners at our firm.
So if we wanted to like move there, then.
Are here.
And I don't know those people Mark was talking about, I haven't
So
been
if
to
you
church
want, I
on a
can
regular
get
basis.
contact
This is another thing.
and
It's
we can get us, so I know,
Very
if
much
I
like
can sit
that.
in the partner, that would be free, because it's me. So
He said he would say
sit with him,
100%.
kind of give him a brief
The church.
overview, he's probably gonna want to see some of our financial
Not all,
statements.
I've been going to
So
church.
it's better to go into it
And then
and maybe.
Where I lived in New
get
Hampshire, I
an
lived right next to Grace
get our
Episcopal Church, so I went there.
professional
My
Going
neighbor.
into our church.
I cut their grass for, I cut their grass for them.
Yeah, I know, I'm like, all right, Marco, forget about the building now.
Here I am. As you're finishing up, I'd like
Well, they deal
somebody to
in real estate
volunteer to come up to the
account.
microphone
So
and share
they,
the
and
first
we
three
have
steps
people
of
with their,
what's
that are within our network of resources that do that
So,
for us.
it's all right, they're still going, so.
We probably do, yeah, I'm guessing that we do, so, you know, so I think it's worth a shot for me to at least, you know, try to find out who the partner in charge is in our region. option for that and then reach out
That's a bit far.
and just ask them
Bit far, isn't
for their help. And then at that point,
It's far.
if he or she feels like there's something that they can definitely help with, we'll get an estimate on how much it will cost.
Will that be done by
I
next
think
Sunday?
we match a lot of congregations.
I mean, I can, you know, I can get on the email and I can talk to my boss and see.
And usually
It might be you find that out this week, and that's where you get. You know, you have, there's gotta be some flex.
It's just something, it's
Step.
some
So you
kind
got
of
one,
professional.
you got two,
Yeah.
you got three? Was that three?
I mean, and I know like an hour of their time is like $450, so even that's still
I meant if someone would be willing to do that, that's all.
yeah, and then, and they would, or we have part-time partners.
I go to the MCC
West
church.
Star partners, we have partners, so they're independent. So, and they're great, I would sell them. What's that?
Maybe they feel compelled to get behind one of these three notes.
Exactly, so we're dealing with people that are kind of in our
So if you have,
They merge.
I'm not trying to cut you off, it sounds like you have a lot of input on your last year.
This one,
So if you have your three, who's gonna do it?
No, we're
And how are
supposed
you
to
gonna
like
connect?
delegate
So
these
they had
responsibilities.
some, they brought a phone.
I think that this
So
one.
you wanna share,
That they were there.
you wanna share everybody's email or make a list of those lists?
So somebody
Stipulations.
in the group,
We only do this to they need to have a say.
like, we don't have to.
But
These
there was an
people
issue.
during the week, we'll talk about it next
But
time.
how to approach other
And then
churches.
somebody needs to volunteer to
There's very
share
few
who's
musicians,
doing
churches,
what,
and
what you're doing,
jobs.
who's three, and someone who's doing what.
I will make contact on tomorrow morning when I go into the office. I'll go talk to my partner and get the ball rolling on that. And then as soon as I hear from somebody about a meeting, I'll let Janet know.
Thank you for your nice note today.
Thank you. Right now, okay, thank you.
I just kind of thought you were going to give us a draft.
What are the three
I think
things?
that's
Can
the
you
question.
repeat them?
How do we approach it?
We need to get an appraisal.
So,
Realtors.
great question. That's a great question. So I think maybe taking a step back would be a way to do that. So, step this way, Paul
But
recommends,
it's still, but we can't task.
you know, and some people like that who've dealt with that.
You know, maybe we do some
So to
travel.
get to
Right,
the next
she's
step.
gonna get us this information on the.
Maybe calling,
You know?
somebody from the Genesis Baptist Church who, had been through a transition process. Or some of our other church leaders.
She has resources where
merge
she works,
and say,
so she's gonna get people
Danielle
from
Martino,
to be in contact with.
versus the city of the, church, you know, did a lot of merge work as well. And you'd like to know how they did it, or just use it as the model. So maybe your step back, get that question.
Oh, yes, yes, I know one already.
Give them a ring.
So we go in the summer.
So gather that information. So you put that together. Because I think there's no right answer to this.
In that case, both ministers.
Well, I guess he's made his list, so I think we have to see if there's anything we may want to
No,
add
I mean, I'm
to
just
it.
saying that if you combine.
Right now, it looks like you're in a constant need of.
We're trying to figure out who's gonna do what.
No.
This week.
Sell it, we got something else.
You guys have a spokesperson and Simon?
Baptist Church. American Baptist Church. We started
I'm not trying to rush you, just trying to understand where you are.
He's in Western, so he does both sides.
Every university does it.
Absolutely, and he just said she's on the council on these. He may not know the name
The most.
directly, but Marilyn was the person that.
Are you guys all talking together? Come up with your plans? From a birdie perspective, it looks like you have 3 or 4 conversations.
Oh, is this for me?
Little birdie.
Yeah, that's your homework.
Thank you very much.
I'm a teacher, I'm good ahead of you.
So we're really
I'm just
good.
thinking that in order to have a discussion about it,
I am going to call
you know, it's kind of,
who is a realtor.
you know, so I don't know what the best method for communication
Mark
is
is
going
going
to
to
be this
contact
week.
Bill Hadley, as we talked
There's
about.
an email chain that goes around.
I'm gonna do my
He
assignment
may be
now.
able to put us in touch with some people that might be interested.
I'm doing my assignment now, I don't like homework.
Watch the boards.
I believe they're waiting for the mayor to.
Peter Nystrom is the mayor, to let them know what's going on, when and, tonight. Okay, well, we'll make sure David tells them what
Wanted to be elected.
That's all right.
My son worked for
All right, so I'm gonna go ahead. We have somebody come up and present, somebody volunteer to present. Barbara, you can you have somebody come up and share what your plans are? All right.
This is the mother and daughter team.
I'm just gonna prompt this and then I'll give it back to you.
Same thing when it goes complex.
Are you working on this one, Barbara?
No, I was listening to people.
But I mean, you need somebody to work on this one. Would you like to work on?
Paul already did.
Okay, you should read it. I think this is.
Yeah.
Because he's gonna wanna know who's doing what.
Okay. I've been here
How's everybody doing?
8 years.
Okay.
How's the satisfaction meter? Satisfaction meter? Thumbs up, thumbs down? All right. I'm not saying happy meter, I'm saying satisfaction meter. All right.
I do have some information from the Salvation Army that might be also opposed to the selling book.
So let's bring that into next week. So that's a great parking lot item. You can just write it on the parking lot if you want. You don't have to put paper in. All right, so I'm gonna have,
Where's the parking lot?
right over there. So I'm gonna have Lee talk about what the selling group is up to for this week and who's gonna do what.
All right, so we've gotten out of the parking lot and I'm getting into my new Subaru Outback. This is for the selling group. Number one, Emily graciously said that she would talk to the company that she works for. They do this sort of thing. They have all this realty people and she thinks appraisals as well. So she's going to talk with them and sit down with them, and because she works for them, that part of it shouldn't cost us anything. We don't know what the fees would be later on, but anyway, this is fact finding. I am going to call Andy Schilke Realty. He is the realtor who sold the old Mystic Baptist Church, and Julie has had experience with him, so I will be contacting him. And David and Cameron are going to have a video call, hopefully this week, with Mayor Peter Nystrom to talk with the town, the city, to let them know that what we're up to. Because it's important to communicate during this process. You don't want it out there, well, no, they said they're leaving. Well, we haven't said that.
And also the goal is also to figure out, in terms of our future ministry for the community, what are the kinds of things to eventually be aiming for? Once we choose our track, how is it that we're gonna reshape our mission? We're strangled by administration. What's the energy, the inclusion, the vision, the discipleship, the outreach? What's that all about? Because we need that.
Okay, Lisa's gonna talk about merge.
Okay, I sat with the merging group and we reflected on all the Post-it notes and we looked over at the priorities that you shared with us and we chose 3 of them. One was list of all possible churches with which to merge. Paul Chase has a list started and Barbara Ricketts is gonna look it over this week and see if there's some more we might add to that list. So I would suggest that if you have thoughts on that, you could let Barbara Ricketts know. Ann Gray has how to approach other churches and congregations. She's already, as we speak, doing her homework by interviewing Julie Martin. And so she's an overachiever. So she will be making contact with people. I think she's already done that once and she's doing it now. And there may be some other people who've had experience doing this and different models of how you would approach another church or another congregation. And Rosemary's going to moderate a discussion during the week among the members of the merging group as far as have a discussion about what we're looking for. So what's important to us as we reach out and look to merge with another congregation. So this is my personal feeling that if you have thoughts on any of those 3 ideas, those are the people you could contact. So list of possible churches would be Barbara Ricketts. How to approach other churches or congregations is Ann Gray. And have a discussion about what we're looking for is Rosemary Johnson. Because I think we all have ideas, regardless of which team or committee or group we're sitting on.
Right. And that's what may change, sit on the other committee, just.
Okay.
That's not you.
Right?
So, and we'll switch things up for next week, and we'll get together about that. And to plan for doing that, we have a very quick kind of eval of sorts to kind of let us touch base with you real quick. It should take you all but 2 minutes. And we promise to get this onto an hour maximum schedule coming up. So Brendan is handing out some forms over here. Please take 1 minute to 2 minutes to complete this form.
Is it okay if I stop the video right now? Yes?
I think we're good.
Okay.